38 Special Plus P Plus, our Treasury load. So this is a hand-loaded version trying to replicate the old Treasury load. And what the Treasury load was a 38 Special Plus P Plus 110 grain semi-jacketed hollow point, moving at 1155 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. So one of my Patreon supporters, Hillbilly Scholar, sent over these 110 grain semi-jacketed hollow point bullets. These are Zero brand bullets. And I'm going to try my best to replicate that load. So I am going to use my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686 and my 2-inch barrel Taurus 605 to do this test with. And a disclaimer here, anytime you're running 38 Special Plus P Plus, you really should be using a 357 Magnum revolver. That's not to say that some 38 Special revolvers can't handle it just fine. It's just that, you know, when you're going over pressure, you want to be really careful. And 38 Special Plus P Plus is way lower pressure than 357 Magnum, so you're definitely safe just by using Magnum revolvers here. So I am using power pistol powder, and the max charge for a 38 Special Plus P with the 110 grain bullet is 7.4 grains. Actually went to 7.9 grains, so a full half grain more over the max charge for 38 Special Plus P. So we're definitely at Plus P plus pressures. And then I have some CCI small pistol. I'm using Magnum primers today because I think that's going to do about the same thing as a standard primer. So we'll see how close I get to that Treasury load with my own hand loads here. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim in the way to clog a hollow point or anything like that. Then I'm going to move on to a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. Then I'm going to have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so when you're talking 3 inches and 16 inches, it's more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches in a real living target. So we're really trying to simulate a 9.5-inch target with ribs in there. So we'll do a plain clear ballistics shot, then a real world simulation shot. Then I will shoot at the steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, I'm about 5 yards from that target. First up, we're going to have this load through the 4-inch barrel. Now, this is actually listed by load data as having 7.4 grains of power pistol at the max, and through a 6-inch barrel, 1192 feet per second. So, judging from I'm trying to replicate this through a 4-inch barrel like the old Treasury load was carried through, that's going to be a significant drop from that. That's why I had to up the charge to 7.9 grains. So hopefully we can get that 1155 feet per second or greater through this. So let's see what I get here. $12.09, $12.55, $11.98, $12.25, $12.33, $11.99. All right, so it looks like I exceeded that Treasury load just a little bit there. So 2-inch barrel, same load here. Let's see what this will do for me. $1,044, $11.25, $11.15, $11.12, $10.92. I'm used to shooting that SP101 now, so this thing, the trigger's so smooth. I popped one off without even realizing I was pulling that trigger again. So one of those was kind of low, but I'll just take that as an average. And one thing I did notice though, huge amount of fireball coming out with this powder out of the short barrel. So pretty impressive velocities overall for 38 Special, you know, sort of, plus P plus. So let's set our ballistics gel block and see how these do in the 2 different barrel lengths. All right, we're going to do our first shot in the plain clear ballistics, our best potential shot. No denim in the way to clog any hollow points, no rib simulation to slow down its potential for its penetration. So let's see what we get here with our 4-inch barrel. All right. 2-inch barrel. Let's go take a look. All right, so that's kind of what I expected. A little bit less penetration with the 4-inch barrel because you're going to mushroom a little bit bigger, and a little more penetration with the 2-inch barrel because you're going to mushroom a little bit less, allowing for it to penetrate a little bit greater. So bottom shot with our 4-inch barrel, top one with our 2-inch barrel. Tiny bit more energy dump with that 4-inch barrel, but not a significant amount difference there. So with our 4-inch barrel, we have a penetration of about 11 inches. And if you were going to calculate that to be real organic gel, that'd be more like 9 inches, because this usually goes a couple inches deeper. And with our 2-inch barrel, we're at about 12 3/4 inches. I know parallax will make that look a little bit off, like it's a little deeper than that, but we're at 12 3/4. So really, this is kind of how this load was designed. They were designing a load that wasn't going to over penetrate. You know, I don't know what their specific needs were that they had to do that, but that was kind of the design. So very interesting. I think it performed pretty much the way that this is supposed to. So let's put on our denim, put in our rib simulations, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation: 4 layers of denim followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent pectoral muscle and skin. Then a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF to represent hitting back ribs. So let's see how this performs through our 4-inch barrel. All right, let me set that back up and we'll hit it with the 2-inch barrel. All right, 2-inch barrel. I gotta kind of go high on this to try to not hit that other bullet. So hopefully I can catch it fine. 2-inch barrel. Let's go take a look. All right, so I successfully caught that. Now here's where things change up quite a bit between those barrel lengths and velocities, because when we incorporate that denim in there and we incorporate that rib simulation there, things change a little bit. Now I wasn't thinking that I would see much change because these are semi-jacketed, and I wasn't thinking I'd see much clogging or anything like that, but I can definitely see that there is a little difference between the 4-inch barrel and the 2-inch barrel in that first 3 inches, which would suggest that that denim actually still created a little bit of an issue for getting full expansion. And then we can see that when we go through our rib simulation here. Massive amount of expansion with our 4-inch barrel, not quite so much with our 2-inch barrel. Massive hole, 4-inch barrel, 2-inch barrel. Not quite as impressive with that 2-inch barrel. So that extra velocity really is the sweet spot for getting that really good performance. And then after going through the rib simulation, we still had really good mushrooming with that 4-inch barrel, and we went to about 13 3/4 inches of penetration. So that's really good to have some pretty good mushrooming, to not go that deep, to still expand. Now, a 2-inch barrel, it isn't that bad, to be honest here, but we're right there at 18 inches is our total track, and then the bullet rolled back. It's just that, you know, the expansion isn't nearly as impressive. So very interesting performance here. I'm actually liking the performance here of these. And one thing that I forgot to mention is, you know, why would you load 38s? Well, here's one reason. The case ejection of those is fantastic. So you have a little bit more efficient cartridge having it in a 38 special case. Less, expansion of that cases, very easy extraction and reloading. And you can get pretty much the same power with a little bit less powder versus if it were in a 357 Magnum case. So being that it was kind of built specifically to be fired through 357 Magnum revolvers, I mean, it makes total sense why they made this, because you get a lot of performance for not a lot of recoil. It's just that with this powder, we had a ton of flash with that 2-inch barrel. So let's pull these out of block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. One from our 4-inch barrel and from our 2-inch barrel. Our 4-inch barrel, we had really fantastic expansion. Just really massive expansion mushrooming. It looks really, really good. One through our 2-inch barrel. Good expansion. Did not quite expand as big as the one through our 4-inch barrel. And when we go through our rib simulation and our denim here, 4-inch barrel and our 2-inch barrel. So our 4-inch barrel one still had some really good expansion if we compare it to the one through plain gel. A little bit smaller, but still very consistent with this one. And look at our 2-inch barrel. For our rib simulation, the skirt busted off. So probably why that happened was because, you know, in a short barrel, sometimes you don't get as good a stabilization in that barrel. So it may have hit not quite as straight. Also, moving slower, it could have slowed down before it hit that rib simulation, and then just, you know, not done so well. When we look at it going through our plain gel, you know, a bit different there. So overall, our 4-inch barrel did a lot better than our 2-inch barrel, but honestly, it's not too bad for what it is. It's just that skirt broke off. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. And like I was saying with the case ejection, you know, that is a very important thing, because if they had used simply light magnums, you might have some issues getting case ejection and getting reloads. And you look at what these loads were made for, they're made for the Treasury Department. So if you have these people back in the heyday of revolvers that might be getting in gunfights with bank robbers and whatnot, you're going to want to have something that's really specific driven for being able to put more rounds on target if you run out of ammo and you're limited to 6 rounds and now you need a reload. So this Safari Land loader here is something just like they would carry. So I want to do a reload here in 6 shots and show how the case extraction is easier with this than 357 Magnum. I'm not going to show the 357 Magnum, but take my word for it. Sometimes they get stuck and they don't want to come out. So, and also reloading would be a little bit quicker. So let's see how I can do with this from 14 yards here. Even with one hand, I can do that. Shoot really, really, really good for me. So I'm going to do the 2-inch barrel. I'm not going to do a reload with this, but another thing here with these short ejectors, a lot of times you don't get very good extraction of 357 Magnum. So to go to a 38 Special often makes more sense. So see how this does for me. And really, really perfect case extraction. So that really sums up really what these loads were made for. They're made for being able to have a lot more firepower than normal, to be able to not over penetrate, and to be able to get more rounds on target and to reload quicker. And I'm sure that made a lot of difference in a lot of situations. So let me back up and see how these fire from some more distance. All right, 75 yards from the target for fun. Loads like this generally do hit pretty point of aim, or sometimes even a little bit low at that distance, just because I'm used to compensating for it jumping up a little bit high with heavier bullets that move slow. So generally they pretty much hit where I aim. So just gonna aim center mass with these 75 yards and see where these hit for me. Yep, a little bit low. First shot I missed, the next one I aimed at the shoulders and it hit low. overall, that's not too bad, considering I'm just quickly firing double action. I don't see anything that's really consistently off one way or the other. So I fired way too fast, but I'm actually surprised that with the speed I'm firing, I'm actually still able to hit. And those look really consistent. I'm not seeing anything trending one way or the other. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. 2-inch barrel for fun. This will probably hit a little bit higher, but I'll still aim at the shoulders. And again, the recoil on this, it's almost nothing. It is not anywhere even remotely close to a 357 Magnum. It is, out of this steel frame revolver, feels like a 38 Special Plus P. So honestly, this load is fantastic in my opinion. I'm gonna call this an improved Treasury load. You know, very, very good performance overall, especially through that 4-inch barrel. Yeah, I wasn't sure what I was gonna get out of that 4-inch barrel because I thought maybe I would get over expansion and very limited penetration. And I kind of did with the plain clear ballistic shot. But going through the rib simulation, I'm thinking, well, if the bullet's not hard enough, the alloy's not hard enough, well, I'll get fragmentation. That'll be worse too. But honestly, this bullet design, this makeup of this bullet seems to be very, very good. It's pretty much perfect for this 1200 feet per second. So I'm going to say this is probably a much better Treasury load than the real Treasury load out of the 4-inch barrel. And out of the 4-inch barrel, I did not notice, I noticed some flash, but not an excessive amount. With this, I noticed an excessive amount with every shot of flash. And the performance wasn't great in our ballistic gel test, but it wasn't bad either. And also the accuracy out of this gun was fantastic. The accuracy out of both of these guns was fantastic. You know, all the misses that you see on steel were me, and you can tell that because the hits I make, some are hitting a little right, some are hitting a little left, some are just a hair high, a hair low. You know, that tells you that if I'm missing, I'm jerking that shot, I'm missing. There's other times I shoot loads and I'll miss a whole bunch of shots, and a lot of people will want to like giggle and laugh, haha, you're from 75 yards, no wonder why you're missing, you suck. But a lot of times what they don't see is that all the rounds are hitting in the same spot when I miss. Like, let's say 5 feet high and 5 feet right, all in the same area, about 12-inch circle. Sometimes that happens. But with this particular load, you know, it seems to be liked by two guns that are very different from each other and very accurate out of both of them. So I'm going to say this is a fantastic load, especially through a 4-inch barrel. Now, like I said, you probably shouldn't shoot this out of a 38 Special revolver, but if I'm going to be completely honest here, you know, the max pressure for 38 Special Plus P is 20,000 PSI. You know, at that max charge of 7.4 of this powder, we're actually below that 20,000 PSI. If I go up a half grain of powder, I don't know exactly where I'm at, probably 23,000 PSI. 38 Special is proofed at over 29,000 PSI. So what I'm getting to here is that if you have a relatively modern 38 Special steel framed revolver, there would be no issues firing this round through something like that. The problem with, you know, recommending, hey, you can shoot this through a 38 Special, is that some person that doesn't understand what they're doing is going to pick up their grandfather's 1898 Smith & Wesson hand ejector, load up these and put them in it, and have some problems. Or maybe they'll do something like that with the 1970s Charter Arms 38 Special, have some problems. It's not going to necessarily blow the gun apart, but it won't be good for it. So based on knowing that people are not the brightest, Only use these in 357 Magnum chambered revolvers, please. So, very, very good. And thank you again to Hillbilly Scholar for sending these bullets. This was a fantastic test, fantastic results. I'm really excited about what we got with this, because I'm going to write this in the books. Keep this load, because this seems really, really good. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.